Two men broke into my home at 2 in the morning. They walked into my armory laughing, whispering to each other like they'd already won the lottery, thinking the heavy steel door behind them was just there for show. But when I pressed the button on my console, and that magnetic lock engaged with a sound like a prison cell slamming shut, the laughing died instantly, and the begging started. I didn't panic. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't even raise my pulse. Because 12 years on the force teaches you one fundamental truth about human nature. Breaking into a house is brave, stupid, but brave. But getting yourself locked inside an ex-cop's reinforced armory with no way out and a camera recording your every meltdown? That's not brave. That's suicidal. That's how the night ended, with two grown men crying for their freedom through 6 inches of steel. But to understand why they were there, and why a quiet man like me had to turn his home into a trap, you have to go back to the beginning. Back before the sirens, before the courtroom, back to the day the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association decided that my existence was a violation of their rules. My name is Dalton. I spent 12 years wearing a badge, working the kind of shifts that turn your hair gray before you hit 30. I worked narcotics. I worked homicide. I saw the things people do to each other when they think no one is watching. And eventually, you get tired of seeing it. You get tired of the politics, the paperwork that matters more than the justice. So I walked away. I took my pension, sold my place in the city, and bought 12 acres of scrubland and cedar trees way out in the county. It wasn't much to look at, just dirt and silence, but it was mine. I built the house myself, slow and steady. I built a workshop for my engines, and I built a secure room, an armory, because when you've seized as many illegal weapons as I have, and when you've collected historical firearms like I do, you don't leave them under the bed. You secure them. It was a vault, a storm shelter reinforced with steel and concrete, meant to keep things safe, not to hurt anyone. 4 or 5 years, it was paradise. My nearest neighbor was a mile away. The only noise was the wind in the pecan trees and the occasional coyote howling at the moon. I thought I'd found the finish line. Then the bulldozers came. It happened fast, the way a fever takes hold. 1 month it was open pasture across the road. The next it was survey flags and heavy machinery. They scraped the earth raw, poured miles of concrete, and suddenly, right across from my gravel driveway, there was Cedar Ridge, a sprawling, pristine subdivision of cookie-cutter houses, perfect lawns, and streets named after trees they had cut down to build them. And with the subdivision came the HOA, and with the HOA came Karen Sterling. You know the type before she even opens her mouth. She was the HOA president, a woman who wore business casual to walk her dog, and looked at the world like she was grading it on a curve. She ran Cedar Ridge like her own personal kingdom, measuring grass height with a ruler and issuing fines for trash cans left out 10 minutes too long. I tried to ignore it. I stayed on my side of the road, minded my own business. But guys like me, we stick out to people like her. I didn't have a manicured lawn. I had a pasture. I didn't drive a shiny SUV. I drove a 20-year-old truck that sounded like a tank. And I didn't follow rules I didn't sign up for. The spark that lit the fuse happened on a Saturday. A beautiful, crisp morning. I was sitting on my front porch, drinking coffee and cleaning my grandfather's Winchester lever-action rifle. It's a beautiful piece, 1894 model, and it needs care. I had it disassembled on the table, oiling the action, minding my own business. Karen walked by on the county road with her teenage son. The kid had headphones in, staring at his phone. He couldn't have cared less, but Karen? She stopped dead in her tracks, staring at me through the fence like I was building a bomb. "Excuse me," she shouted, her voice cutting through the morning peace like a bandsaw. "What do you think you're doing?" I looked up, rag in hand. "Morning, ma'am. Just cleaning a rifle." "In plain view," she shrieked. "There are children in this neighborhood. That is aggressive behavior. You need to take that inside immediately." I didn't stand up. I didn't get angry. I just used that calm, flat voice I used to use on drunk drivers. "Ma'am, this is private property. I'm outside city limits, and I'm breaking no laws. You have a good day now." She turned a shade of purple I've rarely seen in nature. She sputtered something about community standards and safety hazards, grabbed her son by the arm, and stormed off. I thought that was the end of it, just a suburban tyrant venting steam. I was wrong. I had embarrassed her. I had told her no, in a world where everyone else said, "Yes, ma'am." And to a narcissist with a clipboard, that's a declaration of war. It started with the whispers. My neighbor Bill, an old rancher down the way, stopped by a few days later. "Dalton," he said, leaning on his truck, "you know what the lady across the street is saying about you?" "I can guess," I said. "She's telling folks you're unstable," Bill said, looking disgusted. "Says you're a washed-up cop with PTSD who sits on his porch waving guns at kids. Says you're a ticking time bomb. She's trying to get people scared, Dalton." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. That wasn't just gossip. That was strategy. In today's world, you label a guy unstable and heavily armed, and you're setting the stage for a red flag law. You're trying to get the state to come take his property. "Let her talk," I said, though my gut was already tightening. Words are wind. But Karen wasn't just using words. She was using paper. A week later, I was in my workshop when 3 men in uniforms pulled up to my gate. They weren't cops. They were private security, wearing polo shirts with Cedar Ridge Community Safety embroidered on the chest. They looked like they bought their authority at a discount store. I walked down to the gate. "Can I help you boys?" The leader, a guy with a buzz cut who was trying very hard to look intimidating, stepped up. "Sir, we are conducting a mandatory safety compliance check. We've had reports of unsecured firearms on this property creating a public nuisance. We need to inspect your storage protocols." He held up a piece of paper. It looked official, seals, signatures, bold text. But I've written enough warrants to know a fake when I see one. The formatting was wrong. The statute cited didn't exist. And most importantly, an HOA has zero jurisdiction over a property that isn't in the HOA. "You're lost," I said, not opening the gate. "This isn't Cedar Ridge. This is an adjacent property affecting community welfare," the guy said, reciting a line he'd obviously memorized. "Under the community bylaws, Section 4C, we have the right to ensure safety. Open the gate, sir, or we will be forced to document your noncompliance." I looked at the guy behind him, a young kid, maybe 22, named Evan. I saw his name tag. Evan looked terrified. He was shifting his weight, looking at the ground, looking at me. He knew this was wrong. He knew they were crossing a line. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "That piece of paper is garbage. You are standing on private land. If you cross this fence line, you are trespassing, and if you try to force your way into my home, you are committing a felony. I suggest you get back in your golf cart and go harass someone who cares." The leader glared at me. "We'll be back, and we won't be asking next time." They drove off. I called the sheriff immediately. Sheriff Crowley is a good man, an old-school lawman who knows the difference between justice and nonsense. He came out, looked at the footage from my gate camera, and shook his head. "They're pushing it, Dalton," Crowley said, watching the video. "Karen Sterling is behind this. She's been calling the station every day demanding we raid your house. Says you're a menace. I told her to kick rocks, but she's got money and she's got lawyers." "What was that paper they had?" I asked. "Forged," Crowley said flatly. "She's drafting fake enforcement orders, trying to scare you into letting them in so they can find something to use against you. Watch your back. Desperate people do stupid things." That night, the young guard, Evan, came back. He didn't come to the gate. He parked his car a quarter-mile down the road and walked through the brush to my fence line. I saw him on the thermal cameras before he even got close. I walked out to meet him, keeping my hand near my belt, just in case. "Mr. Dalton?" he whispered, standing in the shadows. I shouldn't be here." "Then why are you, Evan?" I asked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. His hands were shaking. "Because she's crazy," he said, his voice cracking. "Karen, she's not just filing complaints, she's planning a raid." "A raid?" I asked, taking the envelope. "She calls it a retrieval operation," Evan said. "She hired 2 guys. Not us, not security. Heavy guys, from out of town. Repo men. She told them you have illegal weapons. She told them the sheriff is scared to act, so the community has to do it. She's paying them $5,000 cash to break in, secure the weapons, and bring them to the HOA office for safekeeping." I opened the envelope. It was all there. Emails, text messages, fake invoices. She was setting it up for tomorrow night, between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. She even had a map of my house, based on old real estate listings. She had circled the workshop and the back room, the armory. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked him. Evan looked at me, and I saw the kid he really was. "Because my dad was a cop," he said. "And because if they break in here, I know you'll defend yourself. And I don't want anyone to die over a homeowners association dispute. You did the right thing, son, I said. Go home. Keep your head down. He disappeared into the night, and I went to work. I didn't sleep. I went into cop mode. I called Crowley and told him everything. Told him about the raid, the timeline, the mercenaries she'd hired. Crowley wanted to put a squad car in my driveway. I told him no. If they see a cruiser, they walk, I said. And she tries again in a month. We need to catch them in the act. We need to catch them inside. Crowley didn't like it, but he trusted me. I'll have units stationed a mile out, he said. You give the signal, we roll. Don't be a hero, Dalton. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm just a guy who wants to sleep. I spent the next day prepping the house. I turned off the exterior floods to make it look inviting. I left the back window unlocked. Well, not unlocked, but weakened. Easy to pry. I wanted them to come in a specific way. I wanted to funnel them. I sat in my workshop, 50 yards from the main house, surrounded by monitors. It was my command center. I had eyes on every inch of the property. Camera 1 on the gate, camera 2 on the porch, camera 3 inside the hallway, and camera 4 right inside the armory. The armory, that was the trap. I unlocked the vault door. I left it slightly ajar, just a crack. Bait. Inside, I had racks of rifles, handguns, ammo. It looked like a gold mine to a thief. What they didn't know was that the room was a steel box. The door was a custom fabricated ballistic steel slab with a magnetic lock system I'd installed myself. Once that door closed, the magnets engaged with 1,200 pounds of force, and the release switch was right here, in the workshop, under my thumb. 1 a.m. came and went. Silence. Just the hum of the servers. 1:30 nothing. 1:45. Movement on camera 3. South fence line. 2 figures, dressed in black, moving low and fast. Not amateurs, but not pros either. They were sloppy, confident. Hired muscle who thought they were robbing an old man. I watched them creep up to the back porch. One of them used a glass cutter on the back door, reached in, unlocked it. They were in. Dispatch. I whispered into my radio. Suspects inside. 2 males, armed with crowbars. Copy. Crowley's voice crackled back. Units moving. ETA 4 minutes. I watched them on the interior cameras. They moved through the kitchen, ignoring the TV, ignoring the laptop. They were on a mission. They went straight for the back hallway. They had Karen's map. They knew where the treasure was. They reached the armory door. The tall one. The leader saw it was ajar. He smiled. I saw his teeth in the night vision. He pushed it open and stepped inside. His partner followed, carrying a massive duffel bag. Jackpot. I heard the tall one whisper over the microphone I'd installed in the ceiling. Look at this haul. Karen wasn't lying. They started grabbing rifles off the rack. They were laughing, actually laughing, high-fiving, thinking it was easy, thinking they had won. My thumb hovered over the red button on my console. Welcome to the party, boys. I pressed it. Clang. The sound of the heavy steel door slamming shut echoed through the audio feed, followed instantly by the thud of the magnetic locks engaging. It sounded like a bank vault ceiling. On the screen, the laughter died instantly. The 2 men spun around. The tall one ran to the door, grabbed the handle, and yanked. Nothing. He put his foot against the wall and pulled with both hands. Nothing. It was solid as a mountain. Hey, he yelled. Hey, it's stuck. I flipped the switch for the PA system. My voice filled the small, steel room, booming from the ceiling speakers. It's not stuck, I said, my voice calm, detached. It's locked. They froze, looking around wildly, trying to find the camera. Who is that? Open the door. We're security. We have a warrant. You have a ski mask and a crowbar, I said. And you are currently standing inside a reinforced steel bunker. Breaking into my house was brave. Stupid, but brave. But walking into my armory? That was suicidal. The short one started to panic. He started banging on the door with his crowbar. The sound was deafening in the small space, but the steel didn't even dent. Let us out. You can't do this. It's a trap. You're right, I said. It is a trap, and you walked right into it. The sheriff is 3 minutes out. I suggest you put the weapons down, sit on the floor, and think about the life choices that led you here. Karen sent us, the tall one screamed, abandoning the lie immediately. She said it was okay. She said you were unstable. She said we were helping the community. Tell it to the judge, I said, and then I cut the audio, because the sound of them screaming at each other was getting annoying. I watched on the monitor as they turned on each other, pushing, shoving, blaming. Then realizing there was no way out, they slumped against the wall, defeated, trapped in a box of their own making. When Crowley arrived, it was a spectacle, lights flashing, dogs barking. He kicked in the front door, weapon drawn, clearing the house like the pro he is. I met him in the hallway. "Where are they?" he asked. "In the can," I said, pointing to the armory door. I disengaged the lock. Crowley pulled the door open. The two men practically fell out, hands in the air, weeping. They were so happy to see the police they almost hugged the deputies. Getting arrested was a relief compared to being locked in a steel box with an angry homeowner's voice in their heads. They spilled everything. Before they were even in the squad car, they were cutting deals. It was Karen Sterling. She paid us. She gave us the map. She said it was a civil seizure. Crowley looked at me, a grim satisfaction on his face. "We got her," he said. "This is conspiracy, burglary, solicitation. She's done." But we didn't just want an arrest. We wanted an end to it, so we let them play their part. The next morning, I went to the courthouse, not as a defendant, but as a witness. Karen had filed an emergency injunction that morning, claiming I was hoarding dangerous weapons and that the HOA had the right to seize them. She didn't know her guys had been caught. She thought they had the guns, and she was just filing the paperwork to cover her tracks. She walked into that courtroom looking like the Queen of England, chin up, defiant, her expensive lawyer trailing behind her. She stood before the judge and launched into a speech about safety, about how I was a menace, about how heroic community volunteers had secured the weapons for the greater good. The judge, a woman named Holloway who had zero patience for fools, let her talk. She let Karen dig the hole deep, and then she looked at the prosecutor. "Does the state have a response?" The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, we do. We would like to submit into evidence exhibit security footage from Mr. Dalton's home taken at 2 a.m. this morning." Karen's face went pale. She froze. The video played on the big screen, the break-in, the theft, the trap slamming shut, and then the audio. The clear, undeniable audio of her hired thugs screaming. "Karen sent us. She paid us $5,000. The courtroom went silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Karen's lawyer closed his briefcase, sat down, and looked at the ceiling. He knew it was over. Then, the prosecutor played the second clip, the recording Evan had given me. Voicemails Karen had left for the thugs. "Get the guns, I don't care how. Break the window if you have to. Just get them out of there, and we'll say he was threatening people." The judge stared at Karen, a stare that could peel paint off a wall. "Ms. Sterling," the judge said, her voice quiet and deadly. "You didn't just file a frivolous lawsuit. You orchestrated a felony home invasion. You solicited a burglary. You filed false police reports. You fabricated evidence." Karen tried to speak, tried to stutter out an excuse, but the words wouldn't come. "Bailiff," the judge said, "take the plaintiff into custody. I am revoking her bond on the spot, referring this to the district attorney for immediate indictment on conspiracy, burglary, and racketeering charges." The handcuffs clicked, and in that sound, I heard the sweetest music of my life. Karen was let out, crying, looking at me with eyes full of shock. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe the rules applied to her. The aftermath was swift. The HOA board dissolved overnight. The remaining members resigned in disgrace, terrified of being implicated. The residents of Cedar Ridge, horrified by what had been done in their name, voted to disband the association entirely. The signs came down. The rules were burned. Evan, the young guard, testified against her. He got probation and a fresh start. I helped him get a job with a security firm run by a buddy of mine. He's a good kid. He just needed a spine, and he found one. Karen is currently serving 5 to 7 years in a state facility. Turns out, they have a lot of rules in prison. I hear she's having a hard time with them. As for me, I'm still here. The gate is fixed. The workshop is quiet. I sit on my porch in the evenings, cleaning my rifles, listening to the wind. Nobody bothers me. Nobody checks my grass height. Nobody sends me fake warrants. Sometimes, when the wind blows right, I can hear the sounds of the neighborhood across the road. Kids playing, dogs barking, the sounds of people living their lives without fear of a tyrant with a clipboard. It's a good sound. I learned a long time ago that you can't run from bullies. You have to stand your ground. You have to draw a line in the dirt and say no more. And sometimes, you have to let them walk into a steel room and lock the door behind them. Payback isn't about anger. It's about balance. It's about restoring the natural order of things, and looking out at my quiet, peaceful land, I'd say the balance has been restored. So let me ask you guys, did I go too far? Should I have just called the cops and waited? Or did Karen get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever had an HOA nightmare, share it. I read them all. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay legal, and keep your powder dry.